When Robert Motherwell first made a print, he didn't know what he's doing. He knows what he could maybe do. He knows what he'd like to do, but he comes to a master printer and he says, you know, I'm a famous painter. I'm selling for big dollars. I don't know how to make a print, but this is what I like to do. And so your expert master printer goes into the humble mode and says, Robert, let me tell you how we're going to do this. This is how this could happen. And no, that works in painting. That's not going to work for us in printmaking. And you do it with all these big egos, and you step back to do it. And I've witnessed this on many occasions. You step back, and you know there's a lot of big thoughts in the room, and you got to calm them down, and you got to discipline them, and you got them to get them to be good and be better than they would be on their own. That takes a unique individual. And just to know Bob, for me, when I first met him, and know who he'd worked with and what he'd done was and still is mind-blowing. He's worked with the best of the best, the biggest of the biggest, and he's made them better. And at the same time, he's made his own work, and his own work is wonderful. We're so lucky to have him near us. We're so lucky to have him on exhibit in the museum. We're so lucky to have him sell his work through Paradigm. Lucky to have him have a good relationship with Abby. And at the same time, he's a legend. He's a walking legend. And we get to listen to him tonight. So, time for me to get off the stage and bring to you Bob Cross.
In the mid-1940s, right here in Fort Wayne. This is a photograph of the old Fort Wayne Museum and School of Art. This is my father, Stanley. This is my mother, Joanne, looking like she's about to shoot somebody. They met here in Fort Wayne, and when they finished at the art school, they moved to my mother's hometown of Goshen, Indiana, and started a family. I grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and our house was filled with art materials, art which I believe would look much like the art you see in retrospective exhibitions of the Fort Wayne School of Art. Art books, art history books. We had a silkscreen studio in the basement, and my mother kept a still life set up on the dining room table, and anytime my hands looked idle, I was expected to paint a still life. And they were never good enough. I think to this day I could do them in my sleep. So it was an exciting, creative household to grow up in. But once we stepped outside, Goshen, Indiana was and still is a recreational vehicle manufacturing town surrounded by a huge Mennonite and Amish farming community. This sort of setting is very much sort of what you might expect in a traditional Victorian era, no electricity, no running water, and I hate to say it, but I had an Amish Nana as a small child. Like many people from my generation, as a creative artist, I felt it was necessary to get out of town as soon as possible. So as soon as I graduated from high school, I moved to Minneapolis, where a friend of mine had a house painting business, saved enough money to go to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. I took a drawing and painting class and weighed about $1.25 at the time and was freezing my socks off. So I transferred to the Atlanta College of Art the next year. Got a degree in sculpture. Along the way, I met Sidney Thomas Guberman, an architect who quit his job and became a painter. Sidney studied at Princeton in the 1950s, met and became a good friend of Frank Stella's. I worked with Sidney as a part-time painting assistant, learned how to stretch canvases, learned the actual business of art as opposed to learning how to paint, learned how to create things, move shows, and make connections. When I reached my senior year at the Atlanta College of Art, Sidney asked me what my plans were for the future, and I've got to admit, I didn't have a clue. I, like a lot of artists, don't think that far ahead, and I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. I'd be a terrible teacher. I didn't plan to go to graduate school. He recommended that I contact his friend, Ken Tyler. So I did. I sent my 1/2-page handwritten resume to Ken and forgot all about it. In February of that year, I got a call from Ken one morning. He asked me to quit school and go to work with him as a printer in his workshop in Westchester, New York. And I turned him down. I wanted to finish my degree, which I went ahead and did. It was a polite conversation. And after graduation in May, I got another phone call from Ken asking me to move to New York and work with him as a printer. This time I said yes. I'm glad I did. Ken, like many of us, is from northern Indiana. He's from East Chicago. Grew up during the Depression on a farm near the steel mills, and went on to study at the Tamarind Institute of Lithography, where he became a master printer. This is Ken here. The press he's working on is the Tyler hydraulic press, which is an amazing sports car of a press. The stone you see there is an enormous litho stone. It's about the size of a kitchen table. In the background are some of the America La France prints that we were editioning by Robert Motherwell. And the roller he's using was the roller used by Picasso's printer, his lithographic printer. I have no idea how Ken got a hold of that. It was a real honor to meet and work with Ken. It was one of those transformative experiences that I had in my life. He's a true genius. He's worked with just about everybody. I didn't know that at the time. So I went to the interview at Tyler Graphics along with my wife, Lori Hazelrick. Thank you for taking this journey with me. This is Tyler Graphics. On the left, we see Ken's home, which is an old historic farmhouse on an estate. This is the Tyler Graphics workshop that I first was introduced to, which was built in Ken's garage and carriage house. And I think most great businesses are built in garages, and at least start there. The interview, when I first arrived, was at the swimming pool that you see on the far left of the screen. And it's not just a swimming pool. It's the swimming pool that David Hockney used as his subject for all of his famous lithographic pool prints. So it was a little daunting being interviewed inside art history. But Ken was a wonderful, still is, warm, friendly person. We spent a lot of time talking about growing up in northern Indiana, which still means a lot to Ken, still means a lot to me. The interview seemed to be going remarkably well. I stopped him at one point and said that as a sculpture major, I had only taken 2 printmaking classes as an undergrad, one in silkscreen and one in typesetting. That didn't seem to faze him at all. Didn't seem to bother him. Instead, he started talking about how his bug zapper was on the fritz next to the swimming pool. You remember the old bug zappers. And I told him I had a pocket knife and I'd be happy to try and fix it if he didn't mind. And he said, sure, and we both got up, went over to the bug zapper, and instantly he started telling me how to take it apart. And we started looking for the short and the wiring, and long story short, we didn't fix the bug zapper, but I got the job. He was looking for people who liked to solve problems and didn't mind rolling their sleeves up and jumping in. This is a picture of Ken's house. The setting was really kind of magical. It sort of reminds me of the old Sun Record studios where something magical happens in a space you don't expect it to. This is Frank Stella working with Ken on one of the swan engraving prints. This one's called Pergusa. It's probably one of the most expensive prints in the world. These are very large-scale prints. Tyler Graphics made the handmade paper for these on site. The paper was dyed and colored to spec. And this was a transformative print series for Frank as well. Because of my relationship with Sydney, Frank became my primary artist that I worked with while I was at Tyler Graphics. And in addition to working on his prints, I also worked 2 days a week at Frank's painting studio in New York City as one of his painting assistants. And it was a truly remarkable time. This is me pulling a etching for Terrence Lanou. Terrence is an artist who's also from northern Indiana. He's from Hammond. Printing in this setting, Tyler Graphics was known for printing the best artists in the world. In order to make great prints, you have to begin with great artists, which was Ken's philosophy and one that I certainly believe in. And I have to say that to do this kind of work, you need a little bit of ice water running through your veins. You're dealing with millions of dollars of prints, and you're at ground zero. If there's any mistakes, you're throwing a lot of money into a trash can. You're doing something that every museum and auction house in the world is going to be dealing with in the future. When I began doing this work, it became clear that I was a living part of art history. And it was also a great lesson. It taught me to believe that we can create art history ourselves, that this is a living, breathing thing. It's not something in a book or a museum. It's something we can hold right in our hand. I worked with a lot of amazing artists like Roy Lichtenstein and David Hockney and Frank Stella. But tonight I'd like to talk about the artists and individuals that I worked with at Tyler Graphics who had been part of the 9th Street Art Exhibition in New York City in 1951. And I want to do this because the artists and individuals I worked with would relate bits of information from this time period to me. And I think that this also relates to the time we are living in right now in Indiana, where abstract art is becoming the forefront of people's consciousness. The 6 people I worked with were Clement Greenberg, Robert Motherwell, Jack Torkov, Leo Castelli, Helen Frankenthaler, and Joan Mitchell. In the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, a lot of artists were moving to New York and working as abstract artists because there were no opportunities in their hometowns in the Midwest or other part of America. And they began creating groups which were trying to promote art, the New York School, the 8th Street Group. They lived through the Depression, World War II, and after World War II, things began to open up. And these artists began to feel like there weren't really any opportunities. Art at this time in America was just about zero. We were importing art from Europe for the most part. One night after a drinking session with her boyfriend, a young artist named Gene Stubing got tired of listening to abstract painter Milton Resnick complain about his lack of respect in the art world and decided to do something about it. She tracked down the owner of a vacant storefront on 9th Street in New York City, secured the space for a small art exhibition, began to broadcast it to her friends. Everybody wanted to get on board. It was an exciting idea. And a young, unknown art dealer from Italy named Leo Castelli put up $75 to rent the space and started curating the show. They ended up with 74 artists. As you can see, there's a lot of big names there. At this time, these guys were rubbing nickels together to try and pay their rent. Helen told me once when I was out at her place in Long Island that she bought a David Smith sculpture on time. She was so broke it took her 2 years to pay for it. In the background, she's got a Morris Louis painting hanging over the fireplace. It was pretty cool. Anyhow, they got the show together. The show opened up, and Helen told me that every single artist in New York was in that room for the party. None of the work sold. Nobody cared. They got the attention of the Guggenheims and the Rockefellers and the older European-based art establishment. And at this time, America was trying to look like they were not a bunch of farmers and plowboys. So this idea it was perfect. It was the right time, the right place. Because of this show, abstract expressionism was realized as the first major international art movement to come out of America. Over the next 10 years, the capital of the art world shifted from Paris to New York City. As a result of this, the GDP for fine art in America, which at this time was just about zero, in 2021, the GDP for fine art in America was 4.5%, or $900 billion. This is ground zero. This is where it started. And I got to work with 6 of the people involved with this show. Clement Greenberg had accurately predicted that the avant-garde in world art would shift from Europe to America, and he was correct. My first week at Tyler Graphics, I'm working on a handmade paper sculpture project with Tony Caro, the sculptor, abstract expressionist from Britain, who's on the right, and Clement Greenberg. My jaw drops. I can't believe I'm in the room with these people. I'm having lunch with them every day. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-boggling. And I have to admit that I'm so dumbfounded that it's hard to really enter into a conversation with these people at this point. I'm just trying to look good and keep my job. But it's remarkable. And again, I realize that I and we can become a living part of art history if we work hard and put our minds to it. The next week, I began working with Robert Motherwell. Robert is working on one of his large elegy lithographs on a stone, again, the size of a kitchen table. And over the next 7 years, I get to know Robert very well. He's a remarkable man. His code name inside Tyler Graphics is Teddy Bear, because that's just the sort of person he was. He was just a warm, lovable guy. Before he knew I was married, he tried to set me up on a date with his daughter. And it was just truly remarkable to work with him. That first time I worked with him, he had Hans Nemeth with him, the photographer who had photographed Jackson Pollock doing his drip paintings. So, 6 weeks out of art school, I'm being photographed by Hans Nemeth. This is, again, just, hard for me to grasp, but I just put my nose to the grindstone and keep going because I want to keep my job. Over the course of the 7 years I worked with Robert, at one point he shared with me that the people he started working with, the abstract expressionists, were all unified in a revolt against conformity. Post-war America became a very unified big box world that we still see getting more and more of a big brother sort of, everything's photographed, you can't go anywhere without, everything being the same. And that was a really special moment for me when he shared that thought. I felt like I had joined a secret club. It's something I carry with me, that fight against conformity. And it told me that abstract expressionism, abstract art, wasn't just flinging paint at a canvas, that there was a real reason that these people were doing this. There was an aesthetic. There was a philosophy. There was a cause. And I'm just, so grateful that I heard it straight from Bob. The next artist I worked with from the 9th Street Art Exhibition was Jack Torkov. Jack was old school. He came over on the boat from Poland, started working started learning at the New York art schools in the 1920s, became friends with de Kooning, was an early member of the New York school. We brought Jack in I believe it was 82. And these were some of the last prints that he ever made. He died not long after this, so it was a real honor to meet him and work with him. One of the things he shared with me was that not everybody had made it through. Like Joan had said, you need a lot of luck to be an artist, and life isn't always fair. But I'm glad Jack made it through. The next person I was introduced to was Leo Castelli. 30 years after the 9th Street exhibition, Leo is, I believe, the top art dealer in the world at that time. His gallery carries Jasper Johns, Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, Frank Stella, Jim Rosenquist, just goes on and on. Leo was a remarkably elegant and soft-spoken man. He would visit Tyler Graphics quite often. We printed for a lot of the artists he worked with, and we got to know each other quite well. We had lunch quite often, and when I was in New York, he would let me use his private office to make phone calls in between stops, and it was a real thrill to know Leo. In 1984, when Frank Stella had his print retrospective at the Whitney, Leo was there, and afterwards Frank, Leo, and Philip Johnson and I had dinner together, and Frank and I didn't have a whole lot to say. Leo and Philip were talking about their time in the OSS during World War II, and Philip went to great lengths talking about how the OSS, which later became the CIA, had been instrumental in promoting abstract expressionism to the rest of the world, to make us look like we had a real American culture. It was a fascinating evening, the sort of thing movies are made out of. Helen Frankenthaler, what a sweetheart. Helen lived in Darien and New York. She was a regular at Tyler Graphics. We worked together quite often and became quite good friends. She was charming, absolutely charming, and transparent. All of these artists were so sincere and transparent about the early times. This is Helen and I working on a print called Gateway. Ken's in the background holding the tester print. I'm holding a beacon of pure nitric acid mixed with glycerin. We're creating spit bite etchings, which are a real fluid, wet look, and that's sort of a signature look for Helen. But the material itself is a watered down version of nitroglycerin. So it was a little dicey. Basically, she would dip her brush into the acid and then brush it onto the plate, which had an aquatint ground on it. This is Joan Mitchell. Joan, to me, was just the epitome of what you think of when you think of artist. She lived hard, played hard, worked hard. I saw Joan drink one of the printers who had been a sailor in Vietnam under the table one night and come out fresh as a daisy. Watching her work was truly remarkable. I mean, when you think about Jackson Pollock and de Kooning, Joan was just as good. She embodied a sort of primal spirit when she worked, which just, I mean, to me, was one of the truly remarkable experiences that I had at Tyler Graphics. So glad to know her. About the time I was working with Joan, I realized that it was time for me to see what I could do myself. My wife and I had a young daughter, and I made the decision to go to graduate school at Ohio University. And I left Tyler Graphics on good terms. I still get Christmas cards from Ken every year, and we stay in close touch. I created my own business along with my wife after grad school, moved back to Elkhart, Indiana, and our business is something of a hybrid in between interior design and fine art. At the time we started our business, architectural settings were pretty much traditional and traditional revival and sometimes historic. Over the last 30 years, we've had the digital revolution, and I realized recently that the homes I was working on were all, for the most part, contemporary. And I felt that there was a real need to introduce contemporary regional art into these settings because I wasn't seeing it. I first mentioned this to my friend Mark Rushman about a year and a half ago at the Indiana State Museum. I wanted to create a show, an Indiana State traveling show, which would highlight Hoosier abstract artists to bridge the gap between contemporary homeowners and contemporary artists living in the state of Indiana. And Mark was in agreement that this was an idea whose time had come. I went back to Fort Wayne and mentioned this to my friend Abby Leon, and she told me to send a proposal to Charles Shepard. And very quickly, Charles said, sure, let's do a show. And very quickly, we put together a sense of place, abstract art in northern Indiana. And I would very much like to thank Michael Poorman, Audrey Riley, George Morrison, Sayaka Gantz, Theopolis Smith, Jay Zerby, Mary Pat Wallen, Austin Cartwright, Kaylee Dalton, Jake Webster, Monica Meller, and Justin Johnson for bringing their A game and creating what I think is a fabulous show which highlights what we can do as abstract artists right here in northern Indiana. The show follows the same footprint as the Ninth Street Art Exhibition. I think, like the Ninth Street Exhibition, this is an idea whose time has come, that we need to show the world what abstract artists in Indiana can do. I've been extremely pleased with the feedback and the response to the show. I also believe that, like the New York artists who were trying to create a uniquely American art form, I believe that we are creating a uniquely Hoosier form of art. It does have links to the abstract expressionists, which I think is good. I think it's a sincere thing. I think a lot of contemporary art has gone out into an insincere, shock value sort of zone that's just meant to get headlines. And I think what we're doing here is much more honest and connected to where we live. It's also connected to the architecture of where we live. We don't build homes here that look like the homes in Los Angeles or Miami. We don't build flat roofs because of all the snow we've got out here. There are a lot of unique factors like the overcast days that we have all the time. I think that this group is the beginning of something truly unique that could develop into an actual movement. At least I've got my fingers crossed. And like the 9th Street Art Exhibition, I'd like to suggest that it is possible for creative art in Indiana to generate 4.5% of Indiana's GDP. I think that's a realistic goal. I think it's time to consider that. I think this is a beautiful show. I want to thank everybody again for making this possible. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight. I feel like my whole life has just flashed in front of my eyes. If I suddenly pass out, don't resuscitate me.